Hello, everyone, and welcome to the For the Members podcast. I'm your host, Nick Overholt, head golf professional here at Glenmara National Golf Club. I am joined by my first assistant, Carl Puglisi.
Hello, how are we?
And our lead teaching assistant and fitter, Ryan Dimmick.
Good morning.
Guys, what we're looking to do with this podcast is bring you fun and entertaining ways to enlighten you in the world of golf and also help the membership to get to know all of us better. These are the two that are joining me today. They will be joining me each and every podcast that we do. And we will intertwine other members of the staff and additional guests in hopes of bringing a new element to the service that we provide here at Glenmara. So we're going to, in future podcasts, dive deeper into each one of us, what's brought us here, what has made us what we are today. But today's focus of the podcast is an introductory way of showing you what we're going to be doing. Is going to be talking about fitting and getting fit. And that's kind of highlighted by the fact that most of the companies are releasing their new product within the next 7 to 10 days. And hopefully a lot of you are going to be looking to come get fit, whether that's by myself or Ryan or Carl. And hopefully this will get you thinking a little bit about what you need to be thinking about if you do decide that you wanted to get fit for new equipment. And with that being said, I'm going to kick it over to Ryan, who has prepared a few topics for us to discuss as it pertains to fitting.
All right, so fitting. I am a little reserved to use the word expert, but I do give about 1,500 fittings every year and have for the last 4. So I'm definitely proficient when it comes to fitting, mostly because I've done it so often and have seen such a mixed bag of results. Obviously, year over year, try and get better and more precise and even faster, making it a more efficient experience. But a couple of topics I think we want to hit on in terms of when our membership is going for a fitting, whether it's with us or another brand or whatever it may be. There's a couple of things that the fitter needs to know, whether they're asking these questions or not. I would encourage our membership here to be assertive and insert their experiences and a couple of these topics that I kind of want to go through real quick. So we touched briefly on shot shape. So, what's your preferred shape? Do you take instruction? Do you plan on taking instruction? Have you in the past? Are you working on your game? Or are you somebody that comes to the golf course with similar thoughts every day, doesn't do a lot of warm-up, goes right to the first tee and just plays golf? None of these are good. None of them are bad. These are just measurements for the fitter. So frankly, it's indifferent. So I'd encourage you not to be offended if it feels like the fitter is guiding you towards an answer. We're just looking for more information so that they can give you a better fit.
Taking those into account, Ryan, would let's take Carl for instance here. Why don't you run him through a mock interview of how you'd start out a fitting if you were doing it with Carl?
So first thing I'm going to ask him is, what are his goals for the fitting? What is your current equipment doing that you don't like? What is it doing that you do like? And how does it get better? We're in the age where everybody is making good product regardless of brand. So Carl, what are, if we're going through an iron fitting, what is a good goal out of equipment that you are not seeing right at the moment? What makes you want to get new stuff?
For me, personally, it is probably consistency, where I strike the iron, how it digs through the dirt, whether it's toe deep, heel deep, more or less trying to get everything more consistent.
So more consistent in terms of strike. Mm-hmm. Awesome. So when it comes to strike, do you see a particular pattern when it either heel, toe, fat, thin in your own game right at the moment?
Normally toey and probably hitting a fade.
Okay. So toe strike and face open is how I digest that. Sound about right?
Yep.
Awesome. So more centered contact. For your iron strike, tell me a little bit about your divot pattern. Are you somebody who takes a big beaver pelt, or is it more skip to my loo through the turf? What do you got going on?
Normally, no. I'm pretty shallow when it comes to making divots.
Okay. What's your current handicap, or what's your best score, let's say, here at Glenmara in the last couple of years?
The last couple years, we're going to give myself probably a 73, 72.
So pretty close to scratch. That's me knowing you and your 7 rounds that you get to play a year. That's pretty dang good. Obviously, a bunch of talent, so that always makes it easier for somebody to fit when you have somebody who's already pretty dang proficient at the game.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, toe strike, open club face, we're tending to see more of a fade ball flight?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay. And a flight that you're comfortable seeing?
Definitely comfortable seeing it. It's just a hair weaker than I would like on a miss.
Okay.
I'm definitely losing 20, 30 yards when I really miss one.
Okay.
So let me ask you next, somebody who is and has done a million fittings as well. If you hear somebody has too much right orientation to their flight and they're hitting it off the toe, what's the first thing you're thinking of as the fitter that you need to do?
So I think that's one of the dangers when you go to somebody who maybe isn't as experienced with fitting, because there's about 3 different ways to attack that right off the bat, and more once you kind of go down those rabbit holes. A toe hit, the first thought a lot of people are going to have is that the length's incorrect, right? But the fact that it's open is exposing the toe as well. So there's a lot of different things that can go into that. The first thing that I would probably go to is trying a longer club first. That's going to be the first place that I'm going to go.
I would go similar route if it was me. We're saying the same thing, whether those listening or you perceive it as such. Mm-hmm. But the first thing we're going to try and figure out is the static measurements of the club, right? So length and lie angle, and length for sure affects lie angle. And
I think you and I both have discussed this before. The first thing we're trying to attack is centeredness of contact, especially when we're hearing from our fittee that they're looking for more consistency.
1,000,000%.
When we get on TrackMan, especially indoors and we're in a controlled environment, what we see from ball speed on a centeredness of contact versus a toe, even on a square strike, is a big deal. It's 6, 7, 8 miles an hour in some cases. And if you're somebody who's delivering an open club face and hitting it on the toe, now you've turned your 7-iron into a 9-iron, and you're down 7 or 8 miles an hour. Carl, that's your 20, 30 yards you're losing on a bad miss.
Yeah, easily. Just to highlight what Nick has just said, I can't overemphasize how important centeredness of contact is. Whether it's my realm in teaching or whether it's my realm in fitting, it is absolutely the number one priority before anything. If you're not hitting it in the center of the face, I don't care if the ball's going right, I don't care if it's going left, I don't care what it doesn't matter until we can get centeredness of contact.
Absolutely.
We can't make any measurements until we start hitting it in the middle, at least on a relatively consistent basis. And we'll call consistency, for lack of a number, we'll say 51%. More strikes centered than not centered. Mm-hmm. If we can get to there, we can start playing better golf, and without you having to do anything with your technique, technically.
Absolutely.
So one of the questions that I get probably most often as people are going through fits, and this will be an interesting conversation, I want to hear from both of you on this, but if I get fit today and I change my swing to be a better technique, what does that do to the fit of the club? Does it make it better? Does it make it worse? Does it change nothing?
I have definitively held off a lot of people where I felt like lessons would dramatically change what they would need.
Amen.
And that's, I'm sure that I've lost sales on that too, but from my perspective, being honest with somebody in that regard has led to repeat business more often than it's led to the complete just loss of a sale.
Absolutely.
But I also think that's a really important question. When you ask that question of what are your goals for today, there's a good chance that some people are just coming to you because they want new stuff, right? And then in that case, maybe we do just fit them for what they brought to us today because they want new stuff. We're still going to tell them that it could change greatly if they take lessons. And it's another reason why you asked, do you take instruction or not? And also knowledge of who they work with, because knowing styles can also give you an idea of what direction clubs are going to be needed. I personally don't like fitting people into something where I'm like, you're going to need this down the road. Like, I want to fit you for what you have now. So if I think change is going to be imminent, then we're going to refit on another day when you're swinging the way that you will eventually be swinging.
I definitely agree with that. And as long as you're placing the priority on the centeredness of strike, how much of that changes as you get better technique, less inclined to change there. If we find something that you're hitting the center of the face and your technique gets better, technically the equipment should get better with you and not pigeonhole you into one style of play, let's say.
Right.
Which tends to be the most challenging portion of the fits that I go through every year, especially with those outside of Glenmora walls and driving range there, because I don't have a relationship with them to start, and I don't know if what they're bringing that day is what they usually bring. Nerves are an actual part of fittings, especially if you've never done it before. It can be pretty intimidating.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Pretty intimidating. So one of the other things I would want to know as a fitter is, number of rounds that you play per year, and what percentage of, your number of rounds, how much of that is followed up with practice. That will definitely weigh in on how heavy a club I'd be willing to give you. If all you do is play, you're probably only making 40 swings each time you go out and play. Everything else is a short game shot or a putt, something along those lines, which means, and again, no criticism if this is your style, but it means that your gas tank is going to be smaller than the guy who practices and hits 150 balls in the driving range.
Sure.
So I'm not going to give you something that weighs 150 grams.
So let's build on that. That person that swings 40 times a year, right, or 40 times a round, is then also swinging a wedge putter combined 40 plus times. How often do we get asked to get fit for wedges or putters? Very infrequently, right? And a big change can be made for you by getting fit for either one of those, right?
I think we could do a whole podcast just on wedge fitting, and probably a whole podcast just on putter fitting, to be honest.
100%. Absolutely. And so I think that's an overlooked way for people to get better. And I think I say this all the time to people when they pick up a Scotty Cam and they're like, this thing's $400. Well, you use that 30 plus times every round. You hit your driver 11 times every round, but you'll pay $600 for the driver.
Yeah.
Why won't we pay $400 for a putter that's going to make more putts? Like, it's so interesting to kind of get that through to people. But I think that's down the road we definitely need to discuss those items, because that's a big way to get better at golf. Absolutely. And it's so infrequently talked about.
Yeah. I only did, I think, seven putter fittings last year, which is 7 more than I did the
year before.
Previous year.
Yeah.
So 700% growth on that one, Joe Hyde. If you're listening, hashtag you're welcome.
There you go.
Hashtag you're welcome.
Especially with putter technology too. There's way too many putters out there that you could adjust, you can bend, you can do whatever you want to not get fit for a putter. Just go pick one up off the shelf. Yeah,
that's probably number one equipment impulse buy in the golf shop.
Absolutely.
What do you think number 2 would be?
Actually, it's wedges. It's wedges.
I'm glad you said that, because absolutely same thing. And everybody seems to put the same shaft with the same lie angle into these wedges, whether it's male, female, junior, otherwise.
Well, and here's the other thing too when it comes down to wedges, right? Like, you get fit for irons, and you get a specific shaft and a specific lie angle, right? And then you go in and you buy an off-the-rack wedge that is not the shaft you play, right? And not that you'd play the exact same flex and everything, but you would play the same shaft technically in at least your wedges that you're making full swings with. So your gap wedge specifically, maybe your sand wedge, So when you're putting all this effort into getting fit for your driver and your fairway woods and your hybrids and your irons, and then there's 4 clubs in your bag, taking your wedge and your putter into account, that you just walk in and grab, that's half your round, and you're not putting any thought into that. So definitely a really, really important thing to I think, just switch up the focus on it. And I think that that's something that, quite honestly, the golf industry as a whole has not done a good job of.
Yeah.
You know, they're not out there stressing any of these things.
No.
You know,
one thing that I always look at, and I love to tell people too, is there's no set standard in golf. Like every human is so different.
Mm-hmm.
Arm length, body length, torso, legs. You don't necessarily, like every single one of us in this room are going to use 3 different things based off how we are built.
Right.
So like a lot of people that are just going to a wedge rack or going to a putter rack, like that's not going to fit you 99% of the time. Like you're going to put it in your hands. It might feel good because what you're rolling right now isn't working, but eventually you're going to get out there and it's not going to work. Like getting fit is very important.
So here's a discussing putters and getting fit and stuff. What is the most frequent length of putter that comes into a golf shop?
34, right? 35?
35. What's the most frequent length of putter that comes into my golf shop?
33.
30, yeah.
Okay, I get it, I'm short, okay? 34.
I didn't
Why
say
is
32.
The tour average length for all guys that are mostly 6 foot plus is 34 and a quarter.
Pretty much everybody plays a putter that's too long.
Absolutely.
Pretty much everybody.
Absolutely.
Except
So
Robert
yes,
Garrigus.
some of us
Yes.
need shorter putters, okay? Those of us that are short with long arms need short putters.
Robert Garrigus is rolling a 28-inch putter right now, so.
We saw Michelle Wee, who's I think almost 6'2". You saw her bent over at a 90-degree angle with, what was it, a 29-inch putter?
29, yeah.
It is again, just going back to just how overlooked that market is, and again, when we're looking to make people better, easy way to potentially get way better at golf. If you can take it from 40 putts to 34 putts, when you're sitting here asking me, well, how do I get from a 16 to a 10? There's your answer.
Yeah, where's the low-hanging fruit?
Right.
So going back to the questionnaire that the fitter should be asking you when you go to get fit, that's going to be a big part. Like, how do we shave strokes? If let's just say broad stroke, a set of irons cost you $1,200, which is somewhere in the middle for all brands. Can go upwards of $2,000 or $3,000 depending on manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big darn investment. So figuring out what the low hanging fruit of how do we clean up your round. Well, if you've got 40 putts, I really don't want to fit you for irons. I want to go spend a half an hour on the putting green and figure out
Absolutely.
where's that putter pointed. Is it that you can't roll it where you're aiming it,
Mm-hmm.
or is it that we don't have speed control? What is all of that?
So we recently had a member come in who was struggling with putting, and we actually did an impromptu little fit in the golf shop, Carl and I, and one of the most interesting feedbacks from that person once we got him into the style of putter that he needed was, I can line this up way better when the sight line is on the top of the putter and not on the flange, right? And he was right. When the one specific putter that was on the top line absolutely lined it up better.
Yeah.
That little thing can make such a big difference. There was the Dustin Johnson thing that TaylorMade did a couple years ago where they gave him the exact same putter with 9 different styles of alignment aids on the top. And he lined up every single putter different. Every single one. It was the same putter. There was nothing different on the next style, the weighting, anything. Just the line they put on the top of the putter. It goes as deep as that with putting, and I know we didn't mean to go this direction, but I think it's a really important thing, and I actually hope that down the road we get to dive deeper into this, because as you guys know, putting's like my passion. I love talking putting. So.
Well, shameless TaylorMade plug with the GT that's coming out here shortly. Should be available in March, I believe.
Yes.
But toe hang versus face balance versus how much toe hang, center shaft, plumber's neck, slant, mid slant, all those things playing a part as to how that face is balanced or really oriented to where you're trying to point it. So if you can't point it, it doesn't make any sense to fit for a putter that's got more or less toe hang or different.
When we get deep into this, I think what we need to do is send out the Mez
one.
the Mez 1 video where he shows what each style of putter wants to do based off the neck that it has. So I think it's a really interesting topic and very informative for people to feel, because you can go back to the talking about that makeshift putter fitting that we did in the golf shop. He talked about how he felt like his hands were fighting what the toe was trying to do. And by all accounts, that's not what you would think that style of neck should do.
Yeah.
But it is what it does, right? So it's such an interesting thing to talk about as it pertains to that. So
yeah, and we're talking about something that moves 1.5 miles an hour on a 20-foot putt. Right. All right, so now let's talk about a 7-iron that's moving at average, let's say for a middle-aged male, right around 80 miles.
Yeah, 80
an
was
hour
the thought. Yeah, I was in the exact same
7-iron.
spot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right around 80. So what kind of carry do you see at 80 miles an hour?
140.
Yeah, about that.
145.
Depends on head type, right? I mean, are they hitting a muscle back blade, or are they hitting a big game improvement iron that makes a lot more ball speed?
And that's right. And I think that topic almost comes down to not necessarily what is your club head speed, what's your ball speed.
Yeah.
You know, you look at exactly what you just said. Is it a muscle back versus 80 mile an hour club head speed with the Stealth HD might get you 170. There's no spin and there's a lot of ball speed.
Yes.
Anything in that vein. Any of the big game improvement. When Callaway was doing the Epic Star, that was that hollow body, just driver, ball speed off it. The Mizuno Fly High style irons that were the JPX metals. So there's every company makes something that has that style, but you're going to get so much more out of that. Drawback there is, can you move it as a better player?
And so that goes back to this questionnaire, right? So how big a priority is speed or distance for this player? Mm-hmm. Really carry distance. Just a side note there, I super don't care what TrackMan says when it comes to total distance.
Correct.
That's just a guess. I might care a little bit when it comes to driver, not really, but maybe a touch.
Way more with driver. Way more on total distance with driver than with irons. And I think that's an important thing when we do fitting or teaching, right? Mm-hmm. I can't tell you the number of times that somebody looks at the total distance like, that's how far I hit it. It's like, no, mm-hmm. No, it's not. The one to the left of it that says total carry, that is how far you hit it.
So, just an example for those listening, so if I see somebody carry 7-iron, let's say 160 yards, but their total says 171, mm-hmm. How realistic is that total distance at 171?
Right.
That's 33 feet mm-hmm. from where it carried to where it released to. How many greens are just flat and not pitched back to front?
100%.
We're not going to see 33 feet of rollout. If you did, it's because you hit it thin or we don't have enough loft on that club. So what you carry it is where people need to be focused.
So Ryan, I'll ask you this. What is one of the most important numbers to look at for us when we're fitting that nobody looks at other than a fitter?
Important to what?
Getting somebody into the correct iron head and shaft combo with an iron was one of the most important things.
Well, spin is going to relate to angle of descent.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
So angle of descent has become, especially with these hot-faced irons or game improvement irons, or however you want to think about it, same. Mm-hmm. That angle of descent, we can get away with a low spinning. So let's just define low spinning. Anything at 7-iron that spins less than 4,500 RPMs is low spinning.
I would have said 5, but yeah, agreed.
I really try and keep pretty much everybody, other than some juniors and maybe some real slow swingers who've got injury or lack of strength or mobility issue. I really try and keep everyone north of 5,000. Mm-hmm. And I'll kick this question, right back to both of you. So if we do get somebody who comes in with a 7-iron that's got great ball speed, but it's spinning at 3,500 RPMs, where do you see, like any of this, it's give and take, right? So mm-hmm. with the take of distance, we're going to gain lots of distance. What do you give back as a result of having something too low spinning?
The first thing that I'm going to be looking at if somebody's spinning a 7-iron at 3,500 is what is the what's the dynamic loft in impact? You know, because to me that's screaming that we're delivering it with too little loft if we're getting good ball speed as well, right? And now there are the iron heads that kill spin, you know, like the Stealth HD does, but that means that we need to be looking at shaft to add some of that loft back into it. That's going to be the first thing that I'm thinking about if we're not talking golf swing.
Yeah. Yeah, the number one thing I see, so let's assume that dynamic loft is good. Let's assume that they're probably close to the right shaft and they're still spinning it at 3,500. First thing I'm going to ask as a fitter is, what kind of golf ball are you using?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are we playing something that creates enough spin? A lot of times on the range, we've got to do some optimization because not everybody has as good a range ball as we do here.
Absolutely.
Which is an amazing blessing for fitting and teaching and practicing ourselves. But we got to get either loft to go up or we've got to get spin to go up. And yes, with more loft and more spin, guess what happens to distance?
Shortens.
Goes the other way.
Has to.
Yeah. So when you've got a ball that's spinning that little with that much loft, the biggest problem that you run into is distance control. You know, you might hit one of those 7 irons at 160, and then one might go 130, and then another one might go 180.
Right.
If you can't manage, spin is control. And, you know, everybody who's trying to get their driver to spin at 1,500 RPMs, listen close, because nobody on tour does that.
Right.
Not one guy.
Yep.
Everybody's at 25, 26 even. Spin is control.
One of the discussing golf ball, spin, launch, all that stuff as it pertains to playability. And I think that's the word that we haven't really said yet, right? Northeast PA fairways are soft. It doesn't really matter where you are, they are soft. And the greens are firm, right? So needing to have a club that you can hit high with spin so you can control it, even more important in our area of the world than it is in some others, you know, because you go to Philly, everything's hard. Fairway's hard, rough's hard, everything's hard. But here it's soft conditions playing into firm greens, and having a iron that you can comfortably spin and hit high enough to make it stop can trump how far we can hit it sometimes.
Absolutely.
So
I think a lot of people get the misunderstanding about spin too. Is once people start talking about spin, they stop thinking about control. They start thinking about, oh, is my golf ball going too high? Is it getting caught up in the wind? But like, optimizing it is number one, right? Like, you don't want to have too little spin. You don't want to have too much spin. Like, it's bad either way. So making sure you can control it is only going to make your golf game better when it comes to distance control, hitting the ball straighter.
absolutely.
Just goes back to what we literally first talked about and the emphasis on hitting it in the middle of the face. So if all that's true, then we're going to see a consistent spin number just based on that. The shaft's not all of a sudden going to kick out of nowhere and create 2,000 more RPMs than it would have before.
One of, I think, the huge benefits of getting fit indoors is that you can get fit with your golf ball.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
You know, when you're on the range, you're getting fit with something, it's optimizing. When you're getting fit indoors, it's a controlled environment, and you are able to put whatever ball that you happen to play in play. You know, the Pro V1X versus the Pro V1 versus TV5 versus TV5X versus Chrome Soft.
Or AVX or Tour Response or your mid-tier
anything, right?
Tour level golf balls.
And that's you know, continuing to talk about fitting, you know, ball fitting. You know, and going, you see what the difference is in distance. You know, when you go Pro V1 versus Pro V1X, when you go TP5 versus Pro V1, you know, like there's differences across the board with every manufacturer and every golf ball, and they all have different characteristics for a reason, you know, because they fit different people. And above all, most importantly, the best ball each company makes is the best ball for everybody.
Yeah.
There's not I'm not good enough to play that ball. That ball's more expensive for a reason, because it performs best for everybody. If you feel like you're going to lose too many of them, especially here, understandable.
Yes.
Right? But then find out what golf ball works best for you at a lower price point. Don't just guess, you know, because a big difference can be made by what ball you put in play.
especially now that golf balls are getting close to $60 a dozen at the most premium level across all three of the major OEMs.
Yep.
Absolutely, best ball that they make is the best ball that you can play. They're going to have a higher spinning, lower launching version, and they're going to have a higher launching, lower spinning version. That's true of each company. Some of them, like the Script brand, will be more specific with balls like Left Dash, where it does different things to trajectory. But that's another conversation. So that kind of leads me to my next point about club fitting in general. But does ego have any place in a club fitting?
No. Does it? Yes. Should it? No. Those are two different. Those are two different questions.
I absolutely agree with both of you. I think there's a place for it because you can group ego in with aesthetics too. If you don't like the way something looks on the ground because it's too thick or too much offset or too chunky.
Yeah. The first time that I went down to get fit at the Kingdom, their first question was, "Well, what are you looking for, and does what it looks like matter to you?" And I was like, "Look, I get to play golf 7 to 10 times a year, and when I do, I need to play good, and I don't want to look at a shovel." And they're like, "It's P790." Like, there wasn't even a question, right? 770 wasn't out yet. I think where I see ego being more of an issue is when a guy thinks he has to be an X-Flex when he really shouldn't.
Absolutely.
Right? Because if you want to play a smaller iron or a better looking iron or whatever, if you've got the time to put in to get better, cool. Like, we can fit you into the right shaft that fits into that, and we'll optimize you the best that we can. But if you're a guy that's swinging it at 95 miles an hour with a driver and you think you need to be X, we're not overcoming that.
Yeah.
You're going to hit a line drive bullet that's probably going to go low and right, every time.
It's my favorite part about Henry Griffiths and from way back when, and some of you guys will know what I'm talking about when I say this, but Henry Griffiths didn't put a flex or indicator of flex anywhere on the equipment.
Yeah.
The only people that knew what flex it was the fitter and maybe the pro, if he was right there.
And that is the beauty, as annoying as it is as a fitter sometimes, it is the beauty of the companies that go F3, F4, F5.
Absolutely.
Because you can hand it to somebody and they don't know what they're looking at, and what's the first thing a better player does when you hand them a club?
Looks at it.
They look at it. It doesn't matter if you tell them not to; they're going to look at it. That's also the problem with fitting better players, because they'll just adjust what they're doing to what you hand them.
Yes.
And I think that's a really important thing to discuss is, like, when you go to get fit as a better player, you need to go in with an open mind, because you never know where it might go if you do. But you can certainly eliminate a lot of options by not going in with an open mind, right?
Great example of that would actually be, I know everybody listening to this podcast initially will know this name, but I fit Anthony Sebastianelli for a driver late in the year last year, and he was struggling with spin and trying to control the face, and obviously Anthony is a great player and can definitely throw some speed down when he feels like it. He was having trouble finding a shaft, and I knew that if he looked down at the shaft label that I was about to hand him, he would have handed it right back to me. So I preface it by saying, look, this is going to be awesome or it's going to be so that
a lot.
I'm trying to protect myself.
Well, that's right, because there's no way you can so easily discredit yourself as a fitter if you tell somebody what something's supposed to do and then it doesn't do it, right? And it's not a perfect science. So I'll let you go back to what you're saying.
And so at the end of the day, I gave Anthony a shaft that I literally fit 0 people, okay? 0 people into this shaft the entire year. Price was huge. Not that it really mattered to a TaylorMade staffer, but it ended up being the LA Golf Toronto 65X tipped an inch. Not many people are going to pick that up and hit it the first time and make it better, right? So when people are going through fittings, give it, the 3 or 4 swings. It's as important to give it 3 or 4 if it feels bad as it is important to give it back if it's great 3 or 4 swings in a row.
Yeah.
Just as important.
you can swing yourself into or out of.
Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. So 3 or 4 swings, the fitter's going to know within, if they're good at what they're doing, within 80 or 90%, whether it's something that they should pursue and go down a road of similar bend profiles, weight flex, whatever, or get this out of here. It's not going to be effective at all.
In all the times that I've gotten fit, I can only think of one time where I made one swing and handed the club back. But that was because I made one swing. I was like, I'm pretty sure that this club is never making contact with the golf ball. And you're going, I think when you that was such an anomaly there.
Yes.
Most of the time, you're exactly right. 3 to 4 swings, you're going to know whether you like it or you hate it. And that most important part of what you just said was don't keep swinging it until you stop liking it, you know, because I've seen that happen too, you know.
Yeah, if something, you know, matches your DNA, there's a reason that you're hitting it in the middle of the face.
I've been fortunate enough to kind of do some interesting TrackMan studies over my time at various places, and one of the things that we found was that club head speed for somebody tends to peak right around their 40th swing. And it is a steady decline after that.
Yep.
So one of my goals as a fitter is, especially if we're fitting for only one thing, I hate full bag fittings in one sitting. But going back to that, I'm trying to have you fit within 40 swings.
Absolutely.
Because past that, we're not really doing anybody any favors.
I'm really glad you said you hate full bag fittings, because if you think you hate them, I promise you, I hate them 5 times more. And it's not because people can't do it. Most people don't have the gas tank to do it. They don't practice enough on a daily basis. But if you're hitting 150 balls, which is probably baseline minimum for me to do a full bag.
Full bag fitting, yeah.
When's the last time you went through a practice session and hit 150 balls?
Gosh, 8 years ago.
We were juniors.
Yeah, right. I mean,
there's just no way that you're going to be that effective, and frankly, that mentally sharp. If you're fatiguing physically, then you've already fatigued more mentally.
And 90% of the people that we're fitting aren't swinging consistently enough for it. Like, if I'm trying to fit somebody in 40 swings for a driver, right? Let's say that we get really lucky and I fit you within 20 swings, right? What you deal with at that point from that person's perspective is, well, did I get the full experience? That was only 20 swings. How do we know I got the right thing, right? So what if you're trying to go through that with every aspect of your whole bag in an hour and a half? Like, you're never going to get optimally fit across the board, right? And I think that's something really important, and one of the reasons why we were so excited about trying to do this form of communicating is because we can kind of say things in a conversation that it's hard for us to bring up in a conversation with a member, right? Because you don't want, if somebody comes and is like, hey, I want to get fit for a full bag, it's hard to be like, no, you know, like, but in this scenario, we can have that conversation where that's not really optimal, right? You know, if somebody's really pushing the issue and you really want to do it, cool, just know that it's going to be a long experience. It's going to be tiring, and the longer you get into the fitting, the less optimal we probably are going to be.
Not to mention, you're probably going to make some good swings that aren't going to turn out like a good shot. So, I mean, if you're sitting there looking at a bunch of bad shots off good swings, you're not going to be feeling fantastic after 150 swings.
Right.
So that's a good point as well. So as you're going through your fit, you know, right at the beginning, especially if you're getting fit by somebody that doesn't have any relationship with you or relationship with your game, don't take too much credit, both positively or negatively, when it comes to the new stuff that you're being handed. You could be making great swings, but if the fitter makes a misjudgment right out of the gates because he doesn't know you very well,
right,
and you know, you think you make it a good swing and it goes all wild and crazy, even though the club might feel pretty good and look pretty good, don't feel like you're doing something wrong as a result.
Don't be afraid to tell them that you made a good swing and got a bad result.
That's
because
right.
Hopefully if you have a good fitter, that person's going to make the adjustment, right?
Yeah.
And I think to that point, like, giving the fitter feedback is really, really important. And for a fittee who might not be getting fit by one of us, if you are giving that feedback that something doesn't feel right or whatever, and that fitter is telling you that no, this is what you need, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
That's a huge red flag. You're going to want to get a second opinion. And if you happen to go get fit anywhere, and I mean, even like a club champion or someplace, and those guys are fantastic. It's all they do. They're very, very good at it. Don't be afraid to come back to us and double check before you want to, decide to order those things, because, we're going to be able to tell you if it makes sense.
I literally just had that conversation last night with a first-time student who is going to get fit down in, I forget where Sittler's is, but one of our
moved. So yeah,
one of our major tailor-made accounts in the Pennsylvania area, who they do great work down there. They do lots of fittings.
Phenomenal. Yeah.
But telling that student, same kind of deal. Don't feel like you need to pull the trigger right then and there. And Connor Roy and Joe Hyde, close your ears, because that's not what you want to hear. Sorry, but confirm with your professional who has a relationship with your golf game and knowledge of how you swing and what you should be seeing, and bring the data to them. Check it, even if they can't simulate. Whether it's a brand that we don't carry like PXG or Callaway here at Glenmora, we can still confirm those things via TrackMan and video. I have my own TrackMan. The club here has their TrackMan. We'll get you in. We'll make sure. And it doesn't have to be a whole half hour. It might be 5-10 minutes. Confirm.
Yep.
Order it up, or no confirm. What were we doing?
I mean, I can think of at least 10 times off the top of my head within the last year that you were here, Ryan, where we've done that exact same thing for somebody.
Yeah.
And even a couple times older clubs where they're like, hey, I got fit 3 years ago, like, can you guys look at this and just tell me, is it right?
Am I still there?
Right, exactly. And absolutely happy to do that. So guys, I think that's going to be a good place for us to wrap up for the first episode of the For the Members podcast. Guys, hopefully give us some feedback. Let us know how we did, what topics you might want to hear us talk about in the future. I know we're going to be a couple things we have dialed up. Pace of play, definitely a big one that we can't wait to have a discussion about. Just diving more into instruction, more specifically with some of the companies, and then also, as we discussed, how we got to where we are, and hopefully some guests in the future as well. So guys, thank you, and we will see you next time on the For the Members podcast. Thank you.
Cheers, friends.
Have a good one.